So I've sanded these smooth, and while I was at the sander, I tapered these edges a little bit so they fit in the slots better. Now I'm using an 1/8 inch Luan for this, and my thinking is that once it's painted, it'll be fine in the weather and it won't delaminate. But if it does, I will just replace them. If you're more concerned about this, then you might want to use a solid wood that you've ripped down. So I have this piece of hardwood left over from something else I was working on, and it's about 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 square, and that'll be about the right size for what I want on the bottom of the Whirligig to hold a pivot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting the ends at a 45-degree angle so that I don't have this big chunky piece of wood just sitting under the Whirligig where the pivot goes. So this is going to be about 3.5 inches long, and on the top, across the top. And then I'm going to cut this off. Now I'm going to want to mount this with screws, so before I cut these angles in, I'm going to measure in a 1/2 inch and drill the holes while it's still square, just because it'll be easier, and that way it'll make it easier to mount. When that's done, I can drill the holes that are going to hold the pivot, and I'll show you how to do that when I'm done getting it cut out. So I took a 3/4 inch spade bit and I drilled a very shallow hole. And the reason I use 3/4 inch is because that is the size that you need to insert an American penny inside that hole. And then using the pilot hole that the spade bit had left, I put a 1/4 inch hole all the way through this piece. And I did that because I have some 1/4 inch OD brass tubing. And I'm going to cut a piece of that to put inside this hole that the pin will go through. That way, even if the wood swells, it won't affect the pin. And the metal, the penny on top will stop the pin from drilling itself into the wood, into the wooden base of the Whirligig. Now this cannot be added to the base of the Whirligig yet, because I need to have it all together so I know where the balance point is. So the last piece of this is a coupling for a piece of 1-inch PVC pipe. And here's a piece of the pipe. It's going to fit on like that. That'll be part of the stand for the Whirligig. Off camera I've turned a plug that fits inside the top. And I've cut a piece of 3/16 aluminum rod that will fit inside there. And then once this is attached to the Whirligig, this will sit on there and be its swivel. So now that we have all the pieces, I have to glue this together and maybe put some paint over the wood. Other than that, now that we have all the pieces, we can put it all together and see how it works. So I've already put the top half of the man and connected it to the bottom half of the man using a dowel and some washers. I'm about to do the same thing to the female figure here. So I've cut the little dowel to length. I'm using wooden dowels to connect all of these things. You might want to use a piece of wire. It will make it easier to take apart when you want to repaint it. I like using the dowels though. So I'm just going to start the dowel, put a washer in there, take up some of the room, some of the slack. Get this started. Slide the other washer in. I don't want this to be too tight, but I don't want it to be too sloppy either. So now I'll push that in. Before I get it completely in, I'm going to put a drop of hide glue on it. I use hide glue so that I can take out the wooden dowel should I need to, because it's reversible with some heat, a little bit of hot water or something. And then I'll just push it down in the rest of the way. And a little bit of blue paint on that. You'll never know it's there. And it swings freely. Start with the base. And we'll put in the center pillar.
thread in. Outside color on this side.
Before I put the pillar on, I'm going to need to put on the arms. The man is on this side, so I want to make sure that his arms are bending upwards, not downwards. And same thing with the lady's arm on the arms on the other side.
Attach the other two pillars.
Next I'll install the characters. So I have to make sure that this is going to spin freely before I put the propellers on. And this looks pretty good. Now next I'll need some spacers to go in between the eye hook and the outside of the pillar here so that the propeller doesn't rub up against it. And I just happen to have some wooden beads lying around. They were long wooden beads that when cut in half were the right size. Now, if you don't have something like this, of course, you could drill a hole through a dowel or use a piece of tubing or something like that. But you do need a spacer in here so that the propellers aren't hitting the pillars so that they can swing freely. So next I need to attach the propellers. And I was going to take a die and put a thread on the end of this and use nuts and bolts to hold it on. Unfortunately, I thought I had the correct die, the right die for this, and I don't have it. So I've just decided to epoxy these on. And I was concerned that it wouldn't be strong enough to turn this without loosening up. So as an experiment, I took some super glue gel and I applied this rod into this piece of wood to see how strong it was going to be, and it's surprisingly strong. And that's what I'm going to use too. Now I was able to loosen it, but it took a lot of doing. So I think that it'll be fine on this. Now I've used super glue gel in the past. I've mentioned it in some other videos. You may think that it sponsors my channel. It does not. I just really like the product. So let's attach to it. I'm going to put a liberal amount of this on this the end of this rod. the rear one as well. And I want these to be angled in the same direction. I'm hoping that as the wind passes by one, it'll pass by the other, and it'll help to give it a little boost, because it's going to take a fairly strong wind to keep this going. So that seems fine. Now I'll add the wind catcher, the sail. Just put a Lastly, I have to find the tipping point and add this so we can mount it on the pole. So to find the tipping point, I'm just going to use a pencil and move it back and forth under there until it balances. So that's too far that way.
That's actually it right about there. I'll mark that.
So I have the Whirligig up on some blocks on its side. I've drawn a line where my tipping point is. I have a center line on the mounting block. So all I need to do is hold it steady enough to put a few 1 5/8 screws into it to hold it on.